Guys. You talking about Florida? Because they always get those sinkholes. Big enough for cars to get lost in. And so go to Jude, and then put your finger on Numbers 16. Numbers 16. Now, sometimes if I'm announcing a scripture and I announce part and I'm just kind of stalling, it's sometimes because I'm trying to get to the chapter and reference where I want to start. Other times I hear so many people turning, I just kind of wait and announce it when you hear less pages. And then sometimes I'll announce something that's not even close to where we want to be. And thank you for being kind about that, because sometimes I just get it mixed up. But we're going to start, hold number 16 and go to Jude. Jude. Trish, do we have any more of those colored ribbons? Remember we ordered some for Grace? Did we give them all out? Okay. We ought to order some more for some of those folks that are new that we could probably use them. You could use them too? I know sometimes you get a new Bible and or the old ones fall apart or you lose it or... Yeah. Yes. So we've been looking at, and I'm just going to advance this, walk over here and do this, it's just easier. We've been looking at really the second half of this, and this is these historical examples of apostasy. You're saying, boy, you're just like halfway, barely. Well, actually, that will go a lot quicker, the metaphors and the judgment and the safeguards. The longest part was the left side. And we've been looking at these people, and let me find. So we started by looking at these examples, the Israel in verse 5, of how God chastened them because they were not faithful to Him. They failed to believe and trust in God. We looked at the angels that left their first estate, how they were chained. And then we looked at the citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah. And we get to chapter 2 in 2 Peter. This will repeat a little bit. Of how they were perverse, a cesspool of sin. And when we get to 2 Peter chapter 2, it's going to bring Lot into the picture. Lot and his family, and how Lot was a just man and barely got out of there alive. Then we looked at the devil as an example in verse number 9. And then we looked at Cain, the way of Cain in verse number 11. And the error of Balaam in verse number 11. And last week we left off there, so now we go to Korah, Korah. Some of the early English translations just had this spelled C-O-R-E, Korah. But Korah, and this is in verse 11 also. Let's read all of verse 11. Woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsayings of Korah. So who is this Korah? And what did he say? What was he trying to get that made God angry and swallowed him and a bunch of his guys up? Well, this is an interesting story. So go to Numbers 16, and we'll read some portions of this, maybe not the whole chapter. Korah was a great-grandson of Levi. Now, the tribe of Levi was the tribe that was the ones that were not given land, large patch of land to work, but rather they were made the servants of the temple, of the tabernacle, and they were given cities to live in, and they were to receive tithes and offerings from the rest of the tribes for their livelihood. So Korah was the great-grandson of Levi. He would have been a first cousin to Moses. And this is important because this is who he's going to have the beef with. Now understand the Levites. The Levites were the full-time service and attendants in the tabernacle. They were to care for it. So they were the ones that would move that thing around. Now, Aaron, the descendants of Aaron were the ones that were to be priests. Now, a Levite was not allowed to be a priest. That was not their job. And so the Levites, there's three sons of Levi. There was the Gershon, Gershon, the Gershonites would spring from them. And they were given the assignment when the tabernacle had to move. And the tabernacle was pretty elaborate. That was like the portable temple of that day. And so when the tabernacle had to move, they were given the job, certain tasks. There were three sons, three offspring of those sons that were Levites and were to serve the tabernacle and moving it. And they were given certain things, like the Gershons were given the cloth, the curtains, and so forth. Basically, there was a framework. There were posts and arches and so forth. And when it was set up, then they would put the rest of the outside, essentially, in the cloth and the curtains on. And they would have been heavy things to carry. And they were to carry those, and they could carry them in carts. They could put them in mechanized things and move them along. The second group was the second son of Levi, the Merarites. And they were in charge of the frames, the post, the bases that held the post, and the equipment that would serve as infrastructure. And again, they were in charge of all that, and they could use carts. Now the Kohathites, the third son, they were in charge of the ark. They were in charge of the table, the lampstand, the altars, and those things that were considered very sacred. They were used in worship at the tabernacle. And they could not, you put them on carts. They had to put stabs or poles in them and carry them on their shoulder. In fact, you remember the one, I can't remember the exact reference, but they devised this, hey, we've got to move the Ark of the Ark of the Covenant, so it's heavy, let's put it on a cart. And I preached a sermon years ago called Ox Cart Christianity. You put it on a cart and we'll have these oxen pull it, and it'd be a whole lot easier. Let's be pragmatic. Well, the thing got off camber, and the ark started sliding, and one of the servants put their hand out there to stop it, and God killed him instantly, right there on the spot, because they were not supposed to be using a cart. It's supposed to be on their shoulders. And hence we come up with the ox cart Christianity, is because there are certain things we see God specifically desires of us, but we say, yeah, let's tweak it. And we're not really given permission to do that. So they really, these Kohathites, which is where Korah comes from, that was his daddy, they hated the task of moving those things around. In fact, they looked at the priest, because the priest would take these things in the tabernacle and put them fabric on them and put them in cloth protection as such, so they wouldn't get damaged. And they're looking at these priests saying, that we want to do that. That's a whole lot easier. And they envied the priest. So Korah gets it in his thick skull that he is going to, because remember, this is he was the grandson of Kohath, okay? Because he was the great-grandson of Levi. That he was going to team up with two other guys and challenge Moses and Aaron on this whole priesthood thing. Dothan was one of those men, and the other was Abiram, A-B-I-R-A-M, Abiram. And both those guys, by the way, were from the tribe of Reuben. So here's where we come into Numbers chapter 16. Now, in verse 1, now Korah, the son of Ishar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi. And when it says son of, it's the son and then the grandson and the great-grandson. That's what that is. And Dathan, and Abiram, the sons of Elibah, and On, the son of, and we're going to get in all these names, so pardon me as I slaughter them, the sons of Reuben, they were the tribe of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, because this is broken down into groups and ranks and so forth, and said unto them, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown. So they got movers and shakers, right? Verse 3, and they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon yourself, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. Well, we're as equal as you are, and you shouldn't have any more privilege or responsibility than we have. He's trying to pull rank here. And then in verse number 4, and Moses heard it, he fell upon his face, because he knew this is not what God ordained. He's saying, oh man, I got an email today, or text. I'm supposed to be at a missions conference next month. And the pastor texts and says, there is trouble within the ranks. There are some people that are not being very nice. And he says, so, I just kind of sense this is the devil trying to ruin this upcoming missions conference. We're just going to be there, so I think he was preparing us for some things. He says, so pray hard and so forth. The devil's going to fight us. And I just text message back and said, may the earth open up. No. If I get a chance to preach there, maybe this will be the text. No. I just said we'll be praying, and God keep, and we're looking forward to being there. God keep you, and we'll get through it and so forth. In verse number 5, and he spake unto Korah and unto his company, saying, even tomorrow the Lord will show who are his and who is holy. Because didn't he just say, oh, we're all holy. Everybody out here is holy. And will cause him to come near unto him, even him whom he hath chosen, will he cause to come near unto him. And this day take ye censers, this is for their incense, and Korah and all his company, and put fire therein, and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord doth choose shall be holy. Ye take too much upon you, the sons of Levi. A little reverse strategy, because isn't that what they accused Moses of? And so in verse number 8, Moses says unto Korah, see, I pray you, ye sons of Levi, seemeth it but a small thing unto you that God, the God of Israel, has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister unto them? What he's saying is, don't you see the special spot you got? Yeah, you're not from Aaron, you're not a priest, but you're a Levite. You don't recognize the benefit and blessing and privilege in that? And he hath brought thee up near to him, and all the brethren, the sons of Levite with thee, and seek ye the priesthood also? Are you crazy? And for which cause both thou and all thy company are gathered together against the Lord. And what is Aaron that ye murmur against him? Moses didn't see it as an attack just on Aaron, but on God's plan against the Lord himself. Verse 12. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, which said, we will not come up. Nope, we're not answering you. We don't have to talk to you. Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of the land that floweth of milk and honey, Egypt, to kill us in the wilderness, except thou make thyself altogether a prince over us? Moreover, thou hast not brought us up into a land which floweth with milk and honey, or given us the inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will thou put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. Bellyache. We left Egypt. And for this? Man, we had a whole lot better back there. And where are those vineyards and those lush fields we're supposed to be getting? Well, they would have already been there if they would have obeyed God and listened. But now they're wandering for 40 years in the wilderness. And they're complaining? Verse 15, and Moses was very wroth, angry, and said unto the Lord, respect not their offering. I have not taken one ass from them, neither have I hurt one of them. I have not abused my position. I've not been harmful to them. And Moses said unto Korah, be thou and all thy company before the Lord, thou and they and Aaron tomorrow. Be there, guys. And take every man his censer, and put incense in them. And bring ye before the Lord every man his censer, 250 censers, thou also and Aaron, each of you his censer. And they took every man his censer, and put fire in them, and laid incense therein, and stood in the door of the tabernacle of the congregation with Moses and Aaron. So you can visualize this tabernacle, and it's open to a courtyard, and they're standing there at the entrance. Okay, we're here. What are we doing? You gonna reason with us, Moses? You're gonna let us into this elite priesthood? And Korah gathered all the congregation against them unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the glory of the Lord appeared unto all the congregation. Now, I don't know what that looks like, but it must have been magnificent. All of the glory of the Lord appeared to every one of them. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation. Guys, get out of the way. Step back. That I may consume them in a moment. And they fell upon their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and wilt thou be wroth with all the congregation? We're talking about all the people there, the 250 and all the people. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the congregation, says, get you up from the tabernacle of Korah and Dathan and Abiram. Basically, God has given them a chance. You assembled here with these 250 men and these three leaders. Now, whatever happens to them is going to happen to you, but you got an opportunity to get out of here. And Moses says, go, quickly. It's not going to turn out well. And Moses rose up and went unto Dathan, and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spake unto the congregation, saying, depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed with all their sins. And so they got up from the tabernacle of Korah and Dathan and Abiram, and on every side. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the door of their tents, and their wives and their sons and their little children. And Moses said, hereby ye shall know that the Lord hath sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own mind. If these men die in the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. In other words, if these men die natural deaths, you know that I'm lying to you. The Lord didn't send me. But if, in verse 30, but if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open up her mouth and swallow them up with all that appertaineth unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord. And it came to pass, as he made an end of speaking all these words, the ground claved asunder, opened up asunder under them, and the earth opened up her mouth and swallowed them up, their houses, and all the men that appertaineth unto Korah, and all their goods. And they and all that appertaineth to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed up on them, and they perished from among the congregation. Now, we've seen sci-fi on TV and all kinds of weird things, the earth opening up, but this is not science fiction. This is God's power and his glory being manifest. And this has not happened to them before, because this is a new thing that he's going to do. Verse 34, and all Israel that were around about them fled at the cry of them. For they said, lest the earth swallow up us also. They're saying Moses was telling us the truth, man. Run! Don't get near them. Don't talk to them. Don't touch them. Don't come close to their dwellings. Don't touch their stuff, because we'll be included in there. And there came out a fire from the Lord and consumed the 250 men that offered incense. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the son of Aaron the priest, that he take up the censers out of the burning, and scatter thou the fire yonder, for they are hallowed. And the censers of these sinners against their own souls, let them make them broad plates of covering of the altar. For they offered them before the Lord, therefore they are hallowed, and they shall be a sign unto the children of Israel. Ouch, huh? Keep those things. We're going to put them right there where you can see them. And they did that. Verse 40, and to be a memorial unto the children of Israel, that no stranger, which is not of the seed of Aaron, come near to offer incense before the Lord, for he be not as Korah or as his company, as the Lord said unto him by the hand of Moses. Now watch this. After all that dramatic presentation from God, you think the people would stop their murmuring. Verse 41. But on the morrow, all the congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, saying, Ye have killed the people of the Lord. And it came to pass when the congregation was gathered against Moses and Aaron. I tell you, they must have been Baptists way back then. When the congregation was gathered against them, they looked toward the tabernacle of the congregation, and behold, the cloud covereth it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. And Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of the congregation. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Get you up from among this congregation. Again, get going. I'm giving you a chance. It's not going to be good. That I may consume them as in a moment. That's what it was before, a moment. Didn't take a long time. And they fell upon their faces. Moses said unto Aaron, Take a censer and put fire therein from off the altar, and put on incense, and go quickly into the congregation and make atonement for them. God was going to wipe out that whole congregation, all the people. Moses says, Quick, let's go make a sacrifice. Let's plead to God. The end of verse 46, For there is wrath gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun. God was going to kill them with a plague, and he already seen the happenings of it quickly. And Moses took as Moses commanded, and Aaron took as Moses commanded, verse 42, and ran into the midst of the congregation. And behold, the plague was begun among the people. And he put on incense and made an atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stayed. He got in front of where the people were falling with the plague and stood there, and that atonement stopped the anger of God. That was a temporary propitiation of God's anger, huh? And verse 49, Now they that died in the plague were 14,700, beside them that died about the matter of Korah. And Aaron returned unto Moses unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the plague was stayed. Pretty dramatic, huh? God was meaning business. And now if you watch so many religious movements and churches and everything, you think it was a circus. You think it was happy hour. I'm going to say this in the nicest way. Sometimes I have problems doing that, though. But we're concerned about whether we have enough fun stuff for church that, and not about the honor and holiness and glory of God. Now, we can have joyful things, and we can have times where we just enjoy what God has given us. But I think we have swung to entertainment, and I see this. I keep up with churches, different places, and they're having special days, and it's if you took the sign out that who it was sponsored by, you think it was just a community fair. And there's nothing wrong with that intrinsically, but is it a substitution for something? Are we trying to move the ark with the cart kind of thing? And I'm judging from a distance, and that's a faulty thing when you do that. So that's where I'll stop with it at. But I think we need to, not without robbing people of joy and of the blessings that God has given us in things. But at the same time, we can't forget how serious God is. And that this is just a taste of what's going to happen at the end. So now we go back to Jude, now that you have the background, the story. And it's a lengthy story, but I think it was worth us seeing. Because there's just a third of a verse that mentions Korah. It's good to know what he did. Oh, by the way, Korah had 3 sons, and they were not affected by all this. They were not judged by God. Now, we don't know because they were too young, whether they weren't following their father in all this, remained loyal. But those sons later on went to play an important role in God's plan. 7 generations removed from this son, a prophet called Samuel came about from them. 11 Psalms in your book of Psalms is written by the sons of Korah. They became an expert military force to help David in some of his battles. And they were given the job to be the doorkeeper of the tabernacle and so forth in the temple. So, while sometimes a sin affects a whole family in multiple generations, it doesn't have to. Sometimes the kids rise up and are better than the parent. So, go back to Jude 11. So what does it mean? Perished in the gainsayings of Korah. So would you say God is pretty serious about apostasy? He's bringing up this heavy-duty example, and these people would have known that. It was a major story in their history, that God opened up a pit in the earth and swallow them up into its bowels. So we'll just think about these 3 guys that are mentioned in this verse. This section demonstrates that apostasy is not confined to just one type or one class of people. Cain was a tiller of the soil. Balaam was a prophet. Korah was a prince in Israel. But each of them was used to demonstrate apostasy. So apostasy touches prophets and priests and all people alike. There's apostasy in the pulpit, in the palace, and in the poorhouse, someone said. According to William Barclay, he's the late William Barclay, he wrote quite a few commentaries. He said there was a sect of Gnostics. Now, Gnostics is that group that was in the early church a lot, and they believed that man's problem was ignorance. The solution was just getting more education, and you would be enlightened, and you would escape your body, which is inherently evil, and you would be sucked into the great divine, and that would be your final thing. And so this group of Gnostics, called the Orphites, regarded Cain, Balaam, and Korah as great heroes in the Old Testament. So you can see perhaps the author of this commentary saying that maybe Jude was really writing a polemic against Gnosticism, which is still a problem, by the way. So each of these 3 men showed different aspects of unbelief. Now watch this. Cain, he was arrogant, he had malice, and a false piety. He's an example of religious unbelief. I know God, the sacrifice is a blood sacrifice, but I'm not going to believe that. I believe I can please you with my own kind of sacrifice. So really, Cain shows rebellion against God's authority in our salvation. He refused to bring a blood sacrifice like God commanded. And so we have apostates today who are telling that you can come to God on many paths, many ways to God, and however is the one that fits for you, that's what you need to do. Balaam showed an insatiable greediness and subversionness and seductiveness character of the apostates. He was an example of covetous belief. He was greedy, it says in verse 11, right? Greedy. He rebelled against God's authority in separation. The first was salvation, the second, separation. He prostituted his gifts for money and led Israel to mix with other nations. Korah, which we just seen, shows the division and sedition toward rightful authority and is an example of rebellious unbelief. And that's really what he was. He rebelled against God's authority and the service he wants of his people, and he denied God's appointed leaders and attempt to usurp authority that was not his. So what a mix that Jude is using through inspiration to teach this early church, these early churches, about apostasy. And so we have the next section, but I don't want to start it right now because we only got 5 minutes. But I want some feedback. What do you make of that story in Numbers chapter 16? Could lead to some problems. Now there are some legitimate, like in Acts chapter 6, you have the Hebrews or the Grecians says their widows were being neglected in the distribution of food, and they saw it as a valid problem, and they instituted a solution. But there's a difference. Sometimes this complaining, I think we see in Numbers, is rebellious complaining, assuming something that God has never promised you. So, what else do you, or questions that you have about it?
Changing God's rules is almost like taking one of the commandments and saying, we're going to change that.
Yeah.
He had set it up the way he wanted it. It's almost like starting religion.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll see surveys in these preachers' forums about what do you think is the essential things in the Bible that we need to do and what goes into the non-essential. I'm thinking, that's an odd question. Is there anything non-essential in the Bible? That's like sometimes a church will have Bible trivia. And I just don't like that because there's nothing trifle about the Bible. I mean, call it a Bible quiz. Just make me happy. Call it a Bible quiz or something. And I know that's pretty much what they're thinking, but it's like American Idol. I never felt good about that either. I don't want any idols, whether they're American or French or German or whatever. And if they're being promoted as a rock star idol, then maybe that's really could be an idol for somebody. And so I think how we say things sometimes matter and communicates things. So, but you're right. All the Bible's essential. Now, not all the Bible is written to us, but it's all written for us, so we can learn from it. In other words, we don't do animal sacrifices. Unless you're in New York. Is it New York somewhere they're allowing? No, Michigan. They're allowing certain area to do animal sacrifices, if they got the permit and all that stuff. But we don't do that because that is not to us. That's been replaced with the next stage in the dispensations of grace. And so, but we got to be real careful. I've had a person sometimes were talking to me about something, and they said, I said, you know, this talks about you shouldn't do that in the Bible. And they go, oh, nobody ever follows that anymore. So, well, you're right there. Good point. Anybody else? You got 120 seconds. Yeah, they always struggle with unbelief. And in the end, that's why he took them into Babylonian captivity is because he was going to use a more evil nation than them to teach them they needed to trust him. So, I mean, and they had this cloud of glory and all these things that were certainly great signs, miraculous wonders to show them the authenticity of what was being said. Now, today we have the completed Bible, so we don't have to trust for man to tell us something we have never seen and believe it, because we just don't do that today. And that's why I like people to be very careful about saying, God told me this or that. Really? Let me write it as the next part of my Bible, like the next book. Oh, no, it's not really like that. So how did God speak this? Well, it was sort of tentatively, maybe. I said, God has never talked that way to us. He's always certain, isn't it? All right, anyone else? I'd have to look at that timeline. Good question. No, I don't know how much of that. We probably wouldn't have covered a lot when we were doing the Old Testament because there's a lot of detail there. But there are some maps that kind of show. For a while, they were moving pretty rapidly, and then they stayed longer in some areas, trying to make their way to the Promised Land. And then nobody over 20 years old made it in. So, all right, if there's nothing else, we will finish there. Thank you for being here. We'll pray to dismiss and walk away with some things that we learned that are important lessons to every generation. And be in prayer for all those that